Hi, I'm Rain Phoenix of Launch Left. You're watching our Saturday series, We the People, an intentional conversation about politics, activism, and our shared humanity. A space for political candidates, nonprofit organizations, artists, and activists to discuss the many issues facing our world. Today's special guests are Skipp Townsend, Erica Ford, Mike De La Rocha, and Nick Gilley. Please introduce each other, yourselves, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, Rain.
Yes. Well, let me start. Let me introduce Nick Gilley.
I was just about to actually introduce Skipp Townsend, and I have a better introduction for Skipp Townsend. So Skipp, Taco, and I, Mike, you probably know this story. Skipp, Taco, and I were writing a script on Ceasefire. Ceasefire, when I first met it, was a collection of 14 different, Skipp, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, 14 different Crip neighborhoods that had formed when Tookie Williams was put to death by the state of California, had formed to negotiate ceasefires. I met Skipp and Taco at a Christmas party where a group of gentlemen in blue and a group of gentlemen in red were exchanging Christmas gifts with each other, and Skipp had brought some of those people. So Skipp and Taco and I were writing a script, Mike, and we were in my apartment in North Hollywood. They drove up there. This is maybe 2 weeks we had been writing, and I kept getting annoyed because they kept checking their cell phone when we're supposed to be writing, you know? And I'm like, when you're working, you're working. You're not looking at texts on your cell phone. But they're who they are. So I bit my tongue for 2 weeks. And then finally, I couldn't just bite my tongue in fear anymore. And I was like, look, LA tough guys, when we're working, put your cell phones up. And I made them give me their cell phones, and I put them in a hat with my cell phone, and then I put it up on the shelf, right? So we worked all day, and then at the end of the day, I took the hat down, I took their cell phones out of the hat, and I gave Skipp and Taco their cell phones back, and they started checking their messages. And Taco was like, oh, did you see that? Did you get that? And Skipp was like, yeah, I did. Let me make a call. And so Skipp made a call, and I listened to the call, and it was all about tragedy. And what I found out is the reason they were checking their cell phones is because they were getting texts all day about people who had been killed and what they needed to do in response to that. And so I apologized. And that really made it clear who I was dealing with and who I had in my house. I knew before, but I didn't quite understand until that moment. So that's Skipp and Taco. And Skipp's right there.
All right. Thanks for changing the whole energy and the vibe going. You know, you put it on a solemn note. But I was going to say that Nick was a bully, and I met Nick, and he had the insight to film some of what I believe was history. So as he spoke on the different neighborhoods, were Crip neighborhoods that formed Ceasefire, and without me knowing, I walked into a room not knowing that I was the lone wolf in a room full of lions. So as much as I had my confidence and all, I didn't realize that the meeting and that the peace that they were creating were for Crips only. However, the door opened. They asked me to leave a few times, but I kept coming back, and I became one of the, not just members, but executive board members of Ceasefire. And Nick was capturing all that because at that time, people who are really out in the streets doing the work, and sometimes don't realize that we need to start documenting what we do. So I appreciate Nick for that. He was a director already. He was a producer already, screenwriter already. So he walked me and Taco through the process, as he just shared. So Nick has been a brother, a friend, but definitely a mentor. You know, one of the things my mentor, Darren Bo Taylor, taught me was relationship building. And it continued with Nick because Nick has continued to build relationships like the one I have with the Phoenix family. So I'm grateful for Nick and all that he's brought, not just to me, but when he brings it to me, he's actually bringing it to South Central LA because I share all of my resources with the entire community. So thanks, Rain, for having me on. And Nick is a humanitarian, mostly in-kind services, which is great. Some of the things that people don't get credit for. So thanks for having me, Rain, and thanks for the introduction, Nick.
Yes, sir.
That sounds like Mike De La Rocha, because I'm not sure if this is when I met Mike, but it's something that stands out in my head the most. He was doing a documentary with Dream Hampton, and they came to my office, and one of the young men up the block his friend was killed the night before, and he wanted to go and revenge the death. And I think and the funny thing is, Mike, that young man is getting out of jail today. And we spent like 8 hours, I think, talking to this young man about why he shouldn't retaliate his friend's death. And he didn't retaliate the death. That week, I think, or maybe the week after, he did get arrested with a gun in his car. He did 5 years. He came home and he totally turned, his life around and was doing much better. But the criminal justice system sometimes doesn't want those type of young men to turn their lives around. And when he turned, like I had him on TV, there was 30 people shot in our neighborhood in like a 2-month span. And he was helping to bring the different groups and gangs together. And the day after he was on TV with us, someone made up a story about something he did, and he got arrested. And although they couldn't prove that he did something, the person said that they weren't telling the truth, he still couldn't get out of jail because of how the system is set up, and so, it's important for the stories to be told, because sometimes those people who sit in those juries can change how they look at people. Sometimes the people who are sitting behind the judge seat can change how they look at people. Sometimes the people who are, like you said, your followers on your page can get interconnected with people who they never knew how to get interconnected to. And sometimes we talk about, like here in New York, I'm not in New York right now, but in the community in which I live, it's the epicenter of the epicenter for this coronavirus. And one of the things that the city of New York has decided to do is cancel summer youth employment. And they don't understand, with the matriarchs and the patriarchs dying from the coronavirus, who are the breadwinners for most families. And then you're talking about taking away summer youth, what that brings when you talk about gun violence, the crime that is potentially able to give birth out of this whole coronavirus and the canceling of youth. So support from brothers and sisters like Mike and Nick and Rain is essential to people who do the work, like the brother Skipp and myself, because those phone calls, yes, because that's the phone call of the death, but we also get the phone calls to intervene and mediate. And if we don't do it in a timely manner, the situation could pop off, and it would be the phone call about the death. And so that's why we unfortunately don't put our phones down, which is crazy sometimes. Right, Skipp? But, yeah.
I was gonna ask you guys a question first. I'll just quickly, in that scenario with Erica Ford, during that 8 hours, what you left out, Erica, was the landlord of her building 2 times, because Erica was waiting for the city of New York to pay her for services rendered, and this, Skipp, and they were gonna turn off the lights while they were literally saving multiple lives from being harmed. And I was watching this interplay between Erica and her team trying to calm this young man and a landlord trying to take money. And I was like, this is the whole reason why we have the state we're in now, for example, right? And, the harm, like, to me right now, it's not a health crisis. It's a health crisis as much as it is a political crisis, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And what I would love to have you both speak about is the work you do. You're the trusted source for more than just community violence. You're the trusted source for so many things, whether you're interfacing with government entities, or whether you're giving backpacks away for school, or whether you're giving food, for folks that are hungry. I would just like for you guys to share, like, what is the work you do? Why is it so important? And then the last thing I just want to say, Erica Ford is a legend. I love you so much, Erica Ford. Like, she's one of the most selfless people I've ever met. And in a field that's predominantly male and masculine and toxic, I would argue, she's one of the few women that just can really hold it down. But because of her work and her team's work, the entire city of New York adopted her model as the citywide model. And that's something in history I want to make sure it doesn't get forgotten, because there was a Black woman, an Afro-Latina woman at that created something to allow the city of New York, as the largest city in this country, that has some of the lowest levels of violence that they've had in decades, because it's something that happened in the south side of Jamaica, Queens, and New York. So just want to say thank you for your work.
Mike, sorry, I just wanted to just say one thing, and I know it was unintended, so I'm not getting on you, but I do want to point out, because you said in a field that is mostly toxic, and I don't want to, I know you don't mean this, but I don't want to single out the community of gang intervention, which is exactly a Black and Latino male community, as being largely toxic, when it's actually Western civilization that imposed that toxicity onto us when they brought us to this country to work for free. So I don't want to, you know what I mean, imply that somehow Black men
Exactly. Thank you.
So the
commercial, little Nick commercial.
Nah, that was right on. And it's to the nature of everything that we do, right? The violence exists because people put guns and drugs into our community, you know, take away jobs and take away education, inferior and no food deserts, and so on and so forth. And so when you look at the response of the trauma to situations, we lash out on each other. And so that's where the rise of violence comes. And so one of the things that we look on is treating violence as a public health crisis, and treating violence as a public health crisis in the sense of helping people heal. And so we have a 35-foot peace mobile that rides through the community. It's a 35-foot orange peace mobile that brings the concept of peace and healing to the community. And it brings jobs, it brings educational programs, it brings music and arts and cultural programs. But the point of the matter is that we treat it on its holistic piece, and not just take that gun out that person's hand, right? Or stand in between these two people who are getting ready to fight, but we help them heal from the things that make them respond to the issue from a place of violence, you know? And so we also work with our staff, because our staff is 98% formerly incarcerated men and women. And so they too have to heal in their process of giving back and helping to mediate violence in our community. And so we have the New York City Crisis Management System in New York. It is 22 sites and over 60 organizations that work together to reduce gun violence. And one of the things that the COVID has done is brought us closer. And so we're working closer together to distribute the food and to, you know, help young people get laptops and we got gang members doing online classes, and it's just so funny, them in there on their Zoom classes. It's just amazing to the point of them doing Zoom classes and just showing up in the midst of it all. And so that we can, if we are able to control our communities and control the narrative of how we learn and how we eat, we can stay alive and we can advance our community. And so that is what we do. We have healing through laughter every Friday, because our communities are hurting right now. There's at least, just me, 7 people who die a day with this coronavirus in Jamaica, Queens, and in New York City on a large, and it's just, it's devastating. And so we don't want people to go back with this pain to now do more violence, you know. And so we want to help them survive the coronavirus. We want to help them go through it and understand that there's another side. And then how do we stop the cycle of violence from taking over our communities?
Yes, indeed. I want to see if I can remember the question, but the first thing that popped in my mind was the work that we're doing. And today, as we're passing out food, I'm over here, and I got to give a shout out to Lil Doc Throne, Kumasi from the Slausons, Psych, Hakeem. There's a bunch of us over here who are passing out food on the east side of LA. And one of the young guys who was helping came to me and said, "Skip, I got my high school diploma in juvenile hall, and they said they can't find it. Can you help me?" And I'm thinking, man, no, I'm supposed to stop you from crossing the street and shooting somebody. You know what I mean? I'm supposed to make sure you have food for your family. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, I'm gonna have to go in here and research the LA County of Education school system and see how I can help him find his. And that's what happens in the community. There's another guy, Big U. There's another guy, Big U, who and Sule, two reputable guys who do the same work. And they told me that we are now the fathers of the community. That we're not just gang intervention. We're not just the guys who tells everybody to put their guns down, but we are actually the fathers of our own children and everyone else's. So that is one of the things that makes the work emotional, because how can I continue to go in these burning houses like I'm a fireman and I know the house is burning and I'm trying to save people, and what eventually happens is I can't save everyone. So if I bring out 2 bodies and they start breathing and they're like, oh, Skipp, I thank you, and that's a wonderful thing, but there were 4 people in the house and I only brought out 2. So now the realization that as much as I work, as much as people can give me accolades and say, Skipp, you've done it, there's still people that we just don't say, and that's the hard part. And here's something too. I'm giving a young man a bag of food, thinking that I'm solving his problems, and his problem is I need a high school diploma, and I know I got it. So as I give out tools every day, and I'm constantly giving out tools to people, and sometimes at the end of the day, I've given them the wrong tools. They were good for me. They were the tools that I had, but sometimes I'm giving a bunch of painters hammer and nails. They say, oh, Skipp is great, but we can't use this. So that was what came to my mind. So forgive me for not answering the question, but when I was listening, that's where my mind went, is not to the great things that we do, but also to the ones that get away, and where are some of the gray areas, where are the loopholes, and why it's so important to have these conversations and to have support from individuals who, like yourselves, who understand and applaud the work that myself and Erica and others do. So thank you.
I have a question just about, this time is incredibly challenging, obviously, everybody being at home, but also it's this time for potentially out of this can be new systems put into place, right? And new ways of dealing with our communities and things that we would like to see change, right? Because we're in this pocket of uncertainty. That means that there's the opportunity for change and transformation. What to you all would you like to see? Like, what's the most important thing if everything were to go back to quote unquote normal? We hope not, right? What would be the first thing that would help with the work that you're doing that would need to change to really help what you're doing?
I think that, as Skipp just said, some people get left out, and so that means we need more bodies to help us do the work. And I think that one thing that people realize, I watched the BET fundraiser last night, is that people can do a lot with a little, and use their voice to impact many and many issues and many causes. And so if people could just help connect to the people on the ground more so that we can get more resources and get more support, that would be a good thing, because, there's a lot of issues that these young people have because we live in a community that has been impoverished or has been totally, when you look at any of the incidents, whether it's high blood pressure, incarceration, miseducation, food deserts, it's all in the same zip codes around the nation. And so coronavirus, same thing. And so one thing is the eyes that the racism and discrimination has to change, and we have to make an equal playing ground or playing field for everybody in all of these communities.
I totally agree. And one of the things that I've always thought is when you have people like myself, Erica, and others who are consistent and working with young people and working with the community, we get to change the way they see their lives. So we get to work with them and help mold them into healthier people. But what happens is we have to leave them in the same environment that doesn't support the change, whether it's taking them home to mom and dad who are smoking, uncles, or even they're having a furlough from prison or jail or something. You know, we still changing them does not mean we change the environment. And even if, as much as we work, and Mike, you do it too, he works on changing the environment, whether we're talking about the different laws, policies, and stuff like that. As we change the people, we change the environment, we still have not changed the perception that people have on our community members. So it's sort of like, in my opinion, I say it all the time, we take a bath and put on the same dirty clothes. So everything has to change. We have to be responsible, and this is definitely a wake-up call. There were some concerns in the community about how Africans, Blacks were being treated in China, things of that nature. So that takes me back to what's going to happen in about a week or so. We're going to have the anniversary of the civil unrest, and even though they were Caucasian officers that beat Rodney King, a lot of people took their anger out on the Korean community because of Latasha Harlins and because of the relationships that we had, that movies like Menace to Society highlighted when we would be followed around the store. So I think that the perception of Black and brown people, or I want to say people of color, or people who are marginalized the most, no matter what the reason is for that, you have to change the perception that people have on us. It's sort of like they're saying that there's a class of people that they can just throw away. And I don't believe we have people that can be thrown away. So I hope that this is the system that'll change. I don't know what the system is, but that's the system has to change.
There is a habit in the Los Angeles ruling system, which includes the system of celebrity. There is a habit of two things. One, fetishizing, like Skipp has said, fetishizing how thrilling and how much fun it is to be terrified of Black and brown men. That's a larger issue. And then a subset of that is there is developing quickly in the past 10 years, a group of educated, middle class, and working class people who are not from the communities that Skipp is talking about, but now have positioned themselves to speak for those communities. So I'd really like to see both people that assume the right to speak. The first ceasefire meeting I went to, there was a group of maybe 30 active and semi-active gang members, and I was there with the camera. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. What was going on is the whole group had come from a funeral. The funeral was for a man who was sitting right here, his nephew, and a man who was sitting right here, his son. They had just buried their son and their nephew, and the son and that young man was killed by a member of a community that these two men were sitting in. So there was a conflict in the room that had happened and created the death of a family member. And the man and his brother, the father and the uncle, were there to let it be known that they didn't want a response to the killing of their son and nephew the day of the funeral. So that really got my attention. This is a group of people that's not messing around, and they're there to heal their own community, and they have the right and the power and the strength to speak for themselves, and they don't need anybody with a college degree to talk for them. So I'd really like to see that change.
Is this where I clap?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That was beautiful.
We can go on for days, and Skipp and I have known each other for a long time, so there's a lot of war stories. It kind of went into the question of, like, when we talk about public safety or law enforcement, we oftentimes don't think of the example that Nick just gave, right? Where because of the power of these families and these outreach workers, they saved not just taxpayers millions of dollars on a retaliatory homicide, for example, but they kept their community whole, you know? And so for those that don't know the work you do, like, because like if a crime happens, people think I'm just gonna call police, for example. In certain neighborhoods, like, we don't call police because we know that could also cause some violence, right? But if just as a layperson, how do you define the work that you do in the context of health, healing, public safety?
I would say that exactly what you said, that what is happening is the average person thinks about the police, which are reactionary. There actually has to be something that has happened in order for the police to respond. If they come and there's tension or, things aren't right, there's nothing that they can do. So what Nick talked about is that's a prevention. So, well, it's actually intervention as well, because there's something going on. We already have a dead body. There's already been conflict. But how can we stop? How can we respond to conflict? And sometimes we're thinking, how can we respond to conflict before it happens? So I think that there are root causes, and what happens with the police department, with law enforcement, is they look for a way to arrest a person, thinking that that is going to be the solution. By getting an arrest, getting information or intel, as they say. Let's get intel, let's get the arrest, let's get the person into the court system and let it go its course. But that does not address the root causes that are going on, and it does not stop the rest of the community from still fighting and feuding with the rest of the community. So one of the things that we have to do is not only do we have to respond at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning when there is a shooting, but we also have to be present 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning when the children are going to school. A lot of incidents that happen over the weekend will come right back to the school for that next Monday or even the next day. So we have to be in tune with the community, and I like giving shots out. So I'm gonna shoot out Cynthia Mendenhall, which is Sister Soldier out the PJs, and I'm gonna also shout out Shell Dog out of the Jungles, because the reason why they are the best teachers on how to do intervention. Now, I'm not saying they're the best people for interviews. I have no idea what they're going to say during the interview, but they are connected to the parents, the grandparents, the children. They are connected to law enforcement. They're connected to the nonviolent offenders as well as the violent offenders. So they are truly in tune with who should be walking home, who should not be walking, who should be walking a different way. There was a young man who was, after Summer Night Lights, he was walking with a limp as he was walking home. And Shell Dog said, come here. And when the guy came here, he said, man, pull your pants down. The dude pulled his pants down. First of all, I'm thinking, Shell, man, you are totally out of line. I don't care how close you are. But when that young man pulled his pants down, his leg was burned with third-degree burns. And Shell knew that something had happened to him, but he hadn't seen him. But he could tell by the way he was walking, he hadn't been to the hospital. He had not healed himself. So, I mean, those are the things that only a true person who's in tune with the community would know. That little young kid could have lied to me, could have told me anything, but we have to know our community members. We have to know the community stakeholders. We have to know who owns the store. We have to know law enforcement, those who are with us and against us. And once again, we are fathers of the community. We have to really be in tune with the community to know who needs food and who's going to ask and who's not going to ask. Who's out there shooting and fighting because they have nothing else. Lastly, I'm going to end with this. One of the first ceasefires that came to ceasefire, and this is when I came in, was the Rolling 40 Crips and the Rolling 30 Crips. And one thing that Scooby had said, Miguel, he had said, okay, if I'm big killer and all I've done my whole life is fight and kill people, when you tell me the war is over, do you mean I got to be Theodore again? Do you mean that I have to go back to being the person who I've ran from all these years? You mean I have to, there's no one to fight, there's no one to shoot, so then what am I going to do? And that's the point that law enforcement can't address. That's the point that we cannot call the police on Theodore because all he knows is he is a big killer. When I tell him you're Theodore and you got to learn how to read, man, I got to help you get a career. I got to help you take care of your family. That is the most humbling of experience for all men who have lived on their bravado and their fighting skills and their ability to have charm and charisma based on being big killer. So we have to heal the community. The whole bottom line to this, and I think I heard you, Mike, or Erica say something about healing. That is the key to all of this, is our community has to heal one person at a time and the community as a whole all together. We have to start this healing process for everyone.
I agree 1,000% with what Skipp just said. It made me think of the young men that we're working with right now with our online classes, they were involved in a series of, their crew was involved in a series of activities that led to a number of people being killed. And to see them now like struggling between their name on the street and who they are as a person, you see the humbling of them, but you also see like they just don't know. And a lot of people can't fathom the idea that a certain group of people just don't know. But one of the young men, for example, his mother was in my group back in the 90s, and his mother was killed by his father. And so he grew up with his father, knowing, first of all, that his father killed his mother. His mother's gone. His father was in jail. I don't think he ever connected with his father. And so what happened to him during those years, right? Who helped him heal? Nobody. The streets. He turned into something else because he didn't know how to deal with the trauma that he experienced. And so he became like Skipp said, would be that killer, whoever, right? And now it's a process to help people heal, because the police only deal with that person who's committing a quote crime, right? But not what made the person. And the people in our community, we need you to interconnect with the person, the trauma, the journey that brought that person to where they are now, so that you can help us give them the resources that they need. And some of it might just be love, attention in a positive way. And so we give free legal services. We give, as Skipp said, food. We give educational support. We work with the Inroads and Incredible Messengers so that they know who needs what. And we work with both sides of the gun, right? So we're helping the family bury the child. At the same time, we're helping the person who might have done the crime get a free and just process in the court system. And we're not saying that, you know, people are innocent or guilty or whatever, but we are saying that people deserve the right to have a just process, right? And so we do both of them at the same time. We work with the young people in rites of passage, and just all of the different levels of our work is to help that whole person heal, and everyone that is connected to that person, because using the cure violence model, we have to change community norms. We have to stop the infectious disease of violence from spreading. And so this is why we do what we do the way we do it. And that what is just being there at every point of the process. So we're in the juvenile facilities, we're in the schools, we're in the housing developments, we're everywhere someone might turn, we are right there to support them. And that's why we got a 35-foot Peace Mobile. It's called by the city. We got the city to put one in each borough. And it's mobile trauma units, the city calls it, but we don't mobilize trauma. We want people to heal. And so we know that some people can't go to this side of the block, or they can't come to our office because it's in this person's crew area. And so we have the mobile unit that can pull up to different areas and help service people. And so inside the mobile trauma unit, we have a studio, a full-fledged recording studio, where we do pain on beats, so they can just get it off their chest and put it on track, on wax. We have a meditation room where they sit and they do meditation, or they could play video games just to keep young people off the street, or to help that family heal from the loss of a loved one. We have a kitchen, which we call Kepler's Kitchen, where we teach people how to eat alkaline, because what you put in, it helps impact what you put out, right? And so keeping them more alkaline than acidic, and just knowing what foods mean to your body. And now we're in the midst of Corona, it's just right on point, because this is a respiratory disease and it attacks your immune system. And so we got to stay away from dairy and do this and do that. And so a lot of the young people had some of the tools already to stay strong in face of Corona. And you know, we pull up and do block parties and give out food, and just culturally change how people interconnect with each other, but also, as Skipp said, most importantly, how they look at themselves. And so we change the narrative of that young person committing that quote act of violence, and humanize those folks, and humanize the process in which they got to be the person that pulled that trigger, and help go backwards to heal that thing that caused them to run away from themselves. I just want to say, just to what Nick said before, is that he's right on everywhere. You know, there's a lot of people, and it's I've come to the conclusion that it's okay, like if you're gonna speak for me, but at least speak with the knowledge that I have, and make sure that you are saying the right things, and that what you are collecting from speaking on my behalf comes to the ground, because it's not a problem if you're speaking for us and you're getting resources, because everybody can't do everything, but you're not bringing the resources to the ground. And so we have to get the resources on the ground, and the ground is not giving out turkeys on Thanksgiving. You know, for people like the people in the hip hop community, for you just to give out turkeys is not enough, because you help create and build a culture that promotes and exists the longevity of this violence in our community. You know, and sometimes people don't know, but these rappers have beef on racks, but communities really pick up these beefs and, you know, turn into gang sets just on these beefs with these different rappers and so on and so forth. And so you have to come back into the community, whichever way you're doing it, using your voice, whatever it is, to bring resources to help stop that, and not just handing out turkeys and backpacks. You know, we demand on you to do more because you created more.
Because, you know, you both talked about the aftermath of being forced into a lifestyle, then succeeding in that lifestyle, and then having to work your way back out. And I know you have a vehicle for that work your way back out piece, Skip, that if I know you, you'll sit the whole hour and not talk about it. So why don't you talk about that piece the second call did, because that's important.
Yeah, so no, it's a therapeutic group. People come interested in a career, but they leave feeling like they've lost weight. Like, man, I'm glad that's off of me. You know, they leave feeling healthier.
And what have been the results of that, the career results of that?
Yeah, so there are individuals who come, and if they stay connected and this is what they want to do, they become healthy people, and we help them become iron workers, electricians, carpenters. They're working at Ram Stadium. They're working to build the LAX terminals. They're helping to build Conoco, which is the largest airport parking lot that'll ever be, where they're going to be housing the rent-a-car center. We got people working downtown, building different things, the football field on King and Figueroa. So we have thousands of people who are now middle-class citizens. That's the thing that Big John brought to it. So I was going to get them a job anyway. They would have been working at Lucky's Liquor or at, 7-Eleven or something, but John brought the careers in. So now, instead of them having jobs, they are living middle-class lifestyles. And most of the individuals, as I say, have done 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, sometimes for murder, armed robberies, kidnaps. And now this is how we make the community safe, by getting the community members that everyone's afraid of, getting them into a career, making them healthy.
So cool. Thank you all so much for coming and talking and sharing about a little bit about what you do. I know it's the tip of the iceberg, and I wish we could just kind of do this all the time, but I've learned so much myself, and I hope to share this with others who had no idea the incredible work you guys are doing. And I hope that will inspire more artists and activists to help however they can. And thank you for sharing next steps, like what you'd like to see change, because I think that's a really important thing for us all to be visioning, because why not? Why don't we totally decide to change things after this, after we come out of our house? So thank you for your example of what that could look like. And I'm so inspired by it. And I'm grateful to have spent the last 40 minutes with you. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Mike, for inviting me. Yeah. Thank you for letting me see Skip again and hear that they still over here working. Maybe since I'm quarantined in California, I'll run over there to the other side, because I'm just a worker bee. And so maybe there's something I could do while I'm here in LA or California.
You know, one thing I was going to say, Erica and Rain and Nick, it would be cool, Rain, because we have sheroes and heroes amongst us right now. And you know, I feel like I'm like the kid in the candy store because I get to learn all the time. And it would be great to have us come together, just break bread. The only agenda is just to be in community with one another, especially the folks that you've had on the show, like the one we did with George, Patrice, others. Because if folks don't know each other, they should, because there's a heartbeat that's connecting us. There's a spirit. And if anything, this time has shown us that we need each other more than we ever, well, we've always needed each other, but it makes that point clearer. So I would love to co-host or host. All that to say is I would love to get together in person when we get through all of this, you know.
Me too.
I'm down.
I am too.
Seems like I'm a resident of California now anyway. I've been here for 2 months now, so it's like, hey, West Side, here we come.
Yeah, and Skipp, Erica's going to bring the mobile unit hopefully out to California.
Yes.
So
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
with it.